Hello everyone. So we are continuing on this series, Python programming for data. So in this section, we're going to be talking about the list and dictionary, and we're also going to do some exercises on list and dictionary. So let's consider this list of numbers. So we're going to say a list. So we're going to create a list of numbers. And then let's just try printing out our list. So print our list like this. And guess what? We get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down here. So the next thing we want to do is how do we access the individual elements in this list? So the way we do that is by using a concept called indexing. So we're going to use a concept called indexing. So how do we do that? So if we say, for example, list 1 of, so this gives us 1, and then, so this is what happens. Exactly what you're seeing. So we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you print this, you're going to get 1. If you print the second one, you're going to get 2. So 2 is at index 1. 3, the value 3 is at index 2. So that is how you're able to print. Then when you try to print something that does not exist, so index 5 does not actually exist. So it could be any other number here. It could be like 45. It could also be like 22. So in that case, we will have index 3. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3. Index 3 will be 22. And index 4 will be 45. And then when we try to print index 5, because it doesn't exist, we're going to get an index error. So this is how you index individual elements of a list. So let's just try to print just one, not all of them. So let's print this. So we're just going to wrap this inside of a print statement. So we're just going to say print. And we're just going to close it here. So we're just wrapping it around a print statement. And you see at the end here that we get the letter 1 printed here. So because, of course, 1 is in the 0 index position. So let's go to another concept. Now we're going to be looking at updating the elements of this list. So I'm just going to take this list here down a little bit. So we're going to update the element of this list. So the way we do that is, for example, if we want to update, let's say change number 45 to something else in this list. So the way you do it is by saying list, and then you pass in the index of 45. So 45 is at, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So we're going to say list underscore 1 of 4. So the 4th index, and then we're going to change the value to say 67. So, and then we're going to try to print this list. So we're going to say print list underscore 1. And when we print this, you're going to see the result here that the last element of the list has also changed to 67. So the next concept we're going to see, how do we then find the length of a list? So we're going to be seeing how we could get the length of this same list. So let's see how we could do that. So we're going to be trying to get the length of the list. So let me bring back the list here. So here we're going to see how do we get the length of this list. So you see here, I'm getting index error here. So if you try to, for example, shift this list a little bit here. Let's say, for example, you take it away here. So you're going to get some space here. So it's complaining that unexpected indentation. So you have to close this space. So you have to make sure it starts from the beginning. So now everything is fine. So let's see how we can get the length of the list. So Python has an inbuilt function called length. So we can say, for example, ANS for the answer equals to the length of list of 1. So when we print this now, you see, we will get the total length of the list. So let's see what's happening here. It looks like there is something here that is not okay. There's this empty. Okay, so let's try to print the elements of the list. You see, we get 5 because there are 5 elements in this list. You could see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is how you get the length of a list. So the next thing we'll be looking at is how do we append or add element to a list? The way you do that is by saying, for example, we just need to say list 1.append. So you see here, so you just say list 1.append 67. So 67 will be appended to the end of the list. And if we print this, you see, the list now has 67 at the end of it. It stopped at 45, and then we just added that. So we're going to look at the next concept here, still on this list. So apart from appending, you could decide to say, for example, you want to add an element at the beginning of the list. The way you do that is that you use a function called the insert. So the insert. So the way you do that is by saying, for example, list 1, then you're going to do dot insert. And then since we say at the beginning of the list, the first element will be the index. So we're going to say 0. And then the second element will be the value you want to add. For example, let me say I want to add 100. So what will happen now is that when we decide to print this list, 100 will be added to the beginning of the list. You see, now we have 100 at the beginning here. So let me clear and execute once again so that you see it very clearly. See, 100 has been added to the beginning of the list. So this is how you can insert. So a remove is also the same thing. So we could also remove the 100. So I'm going to be leaving that there so that we could see both. So I could say list 1. I'm not inserting again. So I'm going to say list underscore 1 dot remove. So this time around, I'm going to be removing. I'm going to be removing the element itself. So I'm going to be removing back the 100. So you see, when we print back this, you're going to discover that 100 has also been taken away from this last list. So it was added, it was inserted at the beginning. So if you want to specifically insert element at some specific position of the list, you use the insert statement. But when you want to append to the end, you use the append function. So that's what you do. So the next thing we're going to look into is how do we sort the elements of a list. So if we want to sort the elements of the list, the way we do it is that we say my list or list underscore 1, and then we say dot, then we say sort. So this is going to sort the elements of the list. So from the smallest to the biggest. So let me take this one out and let's try to print this. So we're going to say print list 1. You see that. So there is what they call in place. So it's sorting it in place. So you don't need to say, for example, list 2 equals to list 1 dot sort. So it's being sort in place. So we're going to execute this now and you see what has happened. We now have it 1, 2, 3, 22, and 45. See? So the sort has actually happened. So let's see what we do next. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to see how do we, for example, now let's say you have a list. So I'm going to like comment out this. I think we've used this example for this particular list for long. So I'm going to bring a new list, maybe a similar list too, but let's use a longer list. So let me bring this list up here. So let's say we have this list, my list, and let's say, for example, we want to reverse the element of a list. So let's see how we're going to do that. So to reverse the element of this list, so what we do is just say my list.reverse. So what happens here is that the entire, so let me clear so that when I execute the result, we cannot get it. So the entire elements of the list will be reversed. So you see, so instead of having 1, 2 all the way to 10, you are now having 10, 9. So that's how you reverse the element of the list. But what I wanted to talk about was also the pop function. Let's assume that we have a list like this, and we want to remove the last element or the first element of the list. But we want to get hold of that value. So that's when you pop. So let's look at an example. Let's say, for example, I want to remove the first element of this list. So the way you do that is that and put it in a variable. So I would say, for example, first underscore element. You see? So first underscore element equals to my list.pop. So when I print the first element, it will also print the list. You discover that the list itself will be missing the first element. The first element will be missing from the list. So because the first element has been popped out into this variable. When you remove, you can't assign that to a variable because it removes the value and does not return anything to you. But pop pops out the value. So let's see what happens. So you see, there is no longer 10 in the list because it has been popped out of the list. So you might ask, how can we then pop out the last element of the list? So let's say last element. So we want to remove the last element of the list. The way you do that is just to pop it without passing anything into it. So this one pops the first element. This one just pops the last element of the list. And the list will be returned. In this case, look at what happens. You see, now we have the list printed here, but you see what happens here. We had 9, but now the last element was popped out. 1 was removed from the list. From the second pop, the first pop removed the first element, which was 10. And we got this. The second pop removed the last element. And that's why we have this list as the final result. So let's look at what to do again. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look how to iterate through a list. So let's say we have a list like the one we have now. Let's say we want to iterate through the list. So iteration means moving from one element to another. Let's say we have like elements, and elements equal to this. So let me say this. So these are all the elements of the list, and we want to move from one to the other. So the way you do it is that you could say it's similar to the way you, in mathematics you could see something like for every or this is just an English statement for every. So this, we're going to be using a statement called for, that is like for every E element in the list, in elements. So for every element in element, we're going to say print element. So first of all, look at what is happening. We are saying for every element in elements. So that means this is an element in the elements. This is an element in the elements. So the way you represent this in Python is by saying for elements in element, print element. So what happens is going to print all these values out. So this is how you iterate through a list. So you see, so it starts from 1 all the way to 10. So this is how you iterate through the list. So the last thing we're going to talk about before we start solving an exercise is we're going to be looking at how you could concatenate two lists. Let's say you have a list and you have list 1. So I'm going to come here and say, okay, list 1. And this list 1 is equals to like, let's say we have like 1 and 2 only in the list. And then we have another list called list 2. We have like 3 and 4 in the list. So we can use this operator here, the addition operator, to add the two elements, to concat the two lists together. And you see what we get here. So we get 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is how we can concat the two lists into a single list. So enough of this. Now we are going to try to solve a problem actually using lists. So I'm going to create something like list underscore ese. So for an exercise on lists, and then .py. So we're going to create this file. And then we're going to look at a problem here. So what we're going to do is that, let's say we have some set of persons. So we have some persons A, B, and C, and they are about to make, this is what they want to demand for in a restaurant. They want to demand for rice. A wants to demand for rice, B wants to demand for beans, and C wants to demand for fish. So how do we write a program that serves them? So kind of like say A was served, B was served, C was also served. A was served rice, B was served beans, and C was served fish. So, and what this program should do is that it should also remove these items from the list, because when they are served, they are no longer in the waiting list. So maybe we should call this one persons underscore waiting. So these are waiting. And then these ones are, this is the menu for persons. I think this one is better. So, and then when they are served, we should put the persons that were served. So maybe we should call this one Adam, and then Ben. Let's take this one. So Adam, Ben, and Bully. So Adam, Ben, and Bully. And then Adam wants to be served rice, Ben wants to be served beans. So the goal here is that at the end of the day, this served will contain Adam, Ben, and Bully, and also the food that they were served. So it's going to like contain Adam was served rice. So what we would do in essence is that we're just going to have like, so the final result is going to be like this. So we'll have like a sub list inside of here. And this list here will have Adam and rice. And then we'll have another list inside of here. This one will have Ben and beans. And then we'll have another list. It will also have 2 elements. We'll have bully and fish. And then the persons list, the persons waiting will be empty. And the menu for persons will also be empty at the end of the day. So how do we write this program? So the way we can write this program is to make use of the pop function that we talked about. So we are going to iterate through this list. So let's just try to iterate through the list now. So I will kind of like provide you like 2 ways in which we can iterate through the list. So I'm going to be introducing what they call the zip function. So we'll see exactly what it do. Let's say, for example, we decide to say, let's see what happens. So let's print this, or let's create a variable like this. Say, let's say, let's call it persons and demand. So what happens is that we could zip the 2 items, the 2 lists together. So we could do persons waiting, and then we could zip it together with menu for persons. So we could zip this together. So what happens is that this becomes a tuple of all their values. So let's see what happens here. So basically what we could do here is that we could now say for example, let's say for R, which is, let's say R represents result, in person demand. Let's kind of print this and see what we're going to get. So look at what happens. You now get a tuple of the result. You see what has happened? It has joined Adam and rice, Ben and beans, bully and fish as tuples because we decided to zip them together. What happens? So what would have happened if we did not zip them together was that we would have individually, for example, be looping through, for example, we would have said for persons in persons waiting, and then we would have looped through for persons in persons waiting. Look at what we have got. We would have got single items, Adam, Ben. But by zipping them together, we now have a tuple of each of their value, just the way it is in this zip. So every of their value will be printed out, look at like this, instead of like individually when you decide to loop through person in persons waiting. So another way we could loop through each of the items without using the zip, like we did here, is by using the range function. So we definitely know that the length of this list, persons waiting, is 3. So what we could do is that we could create a range. Like for example, we could say for, let's say range. So range norm. So the range norm in range. So you see, in range, and then we're going to pass in the length, which is 3 in this case. And then we're going to say, for example, we should print the range norm. So we're going to print our range norm. So we're going to say range norm. So we're going to print this range norm here. So when you do this, you're actually going to be getting the number 0, 1, 2, 3. But the interesting thing about this is that we could, instead of getting the number, decide to pass in persons waiting, for example, and then passing that number into persons waiting to actually serve as index to persons waiting. And then we could also do the same thing for menu for persons. And you see what happens. So when we execute this now, we still get Adam rice. So we could still print the items in one single loop by taking advantage of this range. And instead of putting 3 here, the other way we could do this is by saying length of persons waiting. And the length of persons waiting will also return 3. So it will be the same thing, just like you see here. Okay, I'm going to leave this aside. I just wanted to show you this. You can take a deep look at it. Pause and take a deep look at it. So, but what we will use now is this zip function. So in this zip function now, you see now that we have a tuple. So we could just append this tuple. So we could just append this tuple, and each time we could remove the elements of this tuple. So maybe I'm going to show you how to implement it both using this range function down here and how we can also implement it using this zip function. So let's see how we could do it with zip. So the first thing we're going to do here is that we're going to, let me take this one down. So we're going to go through the items. We know that this R is going to give us a tuple. So it's going to give us something like this. So it's going to give us like a tuple of each Adam and rice here. So what happens now? That means that's what we are going to be putting. So we're just going to be putting this tuple R, the entire R, inside of the new served. So that's what we want to put inside served. And the way you do that is by saying, we're going to first of all do served.append R. So the person has been served. When it's now served, the next thing is to remove that item from both persons waiting and menu for persons. So how do we achieve that? So we now say, we are now going to say, we are now going to say persons waiting. So that's what we want to do. We want to say persons waiting. We'll do it for persons waiting. And so let me accept both of them. So persons waiting to remove, because persons waiting is actually the first part of that tuple, you see? So we're going to be removing those items from the list. So immediately we serve you, when you are being served, so the person and the menu, so this person is served, we put it in this served list. The next thing is we remove you from the other list, the other 2 lists, and then that's all we need to do. So let's see what happens now. So we are going to be printing both the served. So let's come down here. So we're going to print served. So, and we expect served to be empty. So at the same time, we're going to print persons waiting and menu for persons. So let's see exactly what will happen if we do this. So we still discover here that there's something interesting that is happening here. So we have Adam rice, bully fish, and then we still have Ben and beans. So what is happening? So when we remove this one, so what is happening now is that we are removing items from this same list that we are zipping. So the items are still being removed. So what would have happened is that we would have created a copy so that this list will not be the same like this list. So that as we remove items from this list, we will not be removing items from this zip. So the way you achieve that is by putting dot copy here, so that this copy is actually different from that one. So we put dot copy here and dot copy here. So we're going to see that the next approach will actually be easier. So let's try executing it with this. Look at what we get. You see the served. So let's make sure that it looks good. So let's put something like an F string here. And we're just going to make sure that, so let's say served. So these are the people that were served. And then we're going to do the same thing for this. So when we execute this, look at what we get. You discover that served. So the whole people that have been served is now in the served list. And then the persons waiting and the menu for persons are empty. So you see, and this is what we expect to have. So this is the first approach. But you see here, we needed to copy the list, because when we remove item from the list while we are still iterating through the same thing we are removing from, it led to inaccuracy in the results. So the next approach we're going to do right now is this, using the range function and pop. So let's see how this is being achieved. So now what happens is that, so now we can get the persons. So what we will do is that we'll be popping from the persons and appending. So let me just take this one out. I'm just going to write it quickly and then I'm going to explain it. So the first step we're going to do is each time we get the persons. So each time we iterate through this loop. So we know that, let me just print the item, the range norm, so that we see exactly what we are doing again. So here we are just saying for range number in range of the length of person. So the whole of this is going to return 3. It's the same thing like just passing the word 3 here. And then when we loop through this, look at what we get. So we get 0, 1, 2, 3. So but now that's not what we're interested in. So now we know the process is going to happen 3 times, because there are 3 elements in this persons waiting and number of persons. So what we do is that we are just going to say, for example, person. So for that particular person that is waiting, one of the person, we'll say person equal to, then just to see the person, if the person was really popped out of the persons waiting. So now we're going to say persons waiting. So the persons waiting dot pop, and then for the menu, and then we are just going to make sure that so now in the served, we know that we are providing a tuple. So we are going to say this dot append. So we're appending to that list of served, but now we're just going to pass in a list of person and menu, either a tuple or a list. In the other case, we pass a tuple, but it's still the same thing. It's still okay as long as you're able to represent. So this is now a tuple. So you see, so persons waiting dot pop. So let's see the difference between this result and that result. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to copy this one here so that we don't need to repeat ourselves. I'm just going to make sure that's here. Then I'm going to comment out this first solution completely so that we can see the result of the second solution. So including this zip. So now we see what we're having here, persons waiting, and then the served is empty. The expectation is that these 2 items will now be part of this served, and then the persons waiting and the number of persons, the menu for persons will be empty. So let's come back here and see what we do. So we are popping at each iteration. So for 1, 2, and 3, iteration 1, iteration 2, and iteration 3, we are popping out the person and the menu, and then we are appending it to serve. You see? So this one looks really straightforward. So at the end of the day, what do we expect to see in served? What do we expect? We expect the list for the persons waiting to be empty, and the menu that the persons were served to also be empty. So let's see what happens. See, look at what happens. Served has those items in it. Persons waiting is empty. Number of persons is empty. So this is just a very simple example that I'm using just to illustrate some of the concept we treated using lists. For example, we've been able to work with remove, append using this example. We've also used the F string as well. I've also introduced a new function called zip. And then we've also seen how we could use pop here and append also. So I think this is also a very good example because it will show you how these methods, these list methods are actually used in a real world scenario. So thank you for listening. In the next video, we're going to be diving deep into dictionaries, and we'll also make sure we solve an exercise as well to kind of like extend your knowledge on dictionaries as well. If you like my content, I will encourage you to subscribe to my channel because I will keep them coming and there's a lot of improvement as well. So thank you.